You're welcome back. My guest, Bright Simmons, Honorary Vice President, Imani, Africa. Kobina Atabedu is procurement specialist and management consultant. He's right here in the studio with Samuel Nete George, MP, Ningo Prampram, Deputy Ranking Member, Communications Committee of Parliament, and Member, Public Accounts Committee as well. Joining us on Zoom, the second person to join us on Zoom will be Manasseh Azuriawene, investigative journalist, fellow, Harvard University. Thank you, gentlemen, for making time to join us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Great. Now, let's just have a sneak peek into what brought us here as far as the GRA SML scandal is concerned.
The absence of the ERDMS at that time, where things were done manually and so on, were perhaps part of some of the regulatory challenges. But since that system was installed, a lot of that has been stemmed.
Without this electronic order, BRV cannot enter inside. And this information, when it comes from NPA portal, it is 100% correct.
Once you are able to track whatever is happening on the ERDMS to ICOMs, I mean, by and large, you have tracked all your volumes. And once you get the volumes right, you are likely to get the taxes also correct.
Despite the robustness of the system, the GRA has contracted a third-party company that is taking credit for all the gains made in the sector, making unsubstantiated claims of revenue savings and receiving millions of cedis for a service whose impact or relevance is difficult to ascertain. SML Ghana Limited started what it calls revenue assurance services to the GRA in the downstream petroleum sector in June 2020. The managing director of the company, Christian Tetesoti, says SML is an offshoot of a timber company he will not name. Mr. Soti was Ghana's Controller and Accountant General from 2005 to 2009 and currently a board member of the Internal Audit Agency. He was an Assistant Commissioner of the GRA, and as of 2019, the same time the GRA entered into the agreement with SML, he was the Technical Advisor, the Commissioner General of the GRA. The GRA is the only customer of SML since its establishment.
They didn't have any experience before they started doing this work. There were experienced companies around. There was no bid for this kind of transaction. And suddenly they have become the superior audit institution for the petroleum downstream sector that is getting all contracts. And you ask yourself, what does it take to actually get such contracts?
This is just by inference. Everything shows that somebody was connected, somebody knew about the contract, set up a company, no history in IT, no history in audit, no history in forensics, no history in what we call revenue assurance in telecoms. None of it. And it is given this contract.
Mr. Soti left his job as the technical advisor of the GRA Commissioner General in 2019 to manage SML Ghana in 2020 when the company started its operations for the GRA. SML has its flow meters attached to the pipelines at the depots and records volumes of products that flow through the pipelines and give real-time records of activities at the depots. Players in the industry say real-time reading of loading at the depots means nothing because tax or revenue are not collected in real time. Besides, those figures by SML are not used by the revenue authorities to collect taxes or margins.
SML is being paid 5 pesos per liter for every product that is lifted from the depots. You do the simple math, that means they are paying in excess of about 21 million Ghana cedis every month all right, for the work that they are doing. And that in itself is extremely questionable. These electronic seals that they have, it's not going to cost you $1 million to procure. So why are they staying on by that one-time single investment and taking such colossal amounts of money from the state?
So we have our team also on field, and they are collecting that data. They scan it and it comes straight to our data center.
SML Ghana also scans the way bills that GRA officials at the depots receive for later references. Some sources within the GRA say the GRA officials can scan these documents if they are given the resources to do so. They do not need a third-party company to scan the documents they receive.
We are taking up the responsibility that GRA has to be able to do that revenue assurance and give it to private companies. Because what prevents GRA from doing that one-time investment of ensuring that they can track revenues, even if they want to have a concurrent tracking mechanism with NPA to be able to satisfy themselves?
This is what led to the back and forth between the GRA and the Fourth Estate, the very, very credible research-based journalism hub at the Media Foundation for West Africa. Then on the 29th of December 2023, the president by a letter appointed KPMG to do a number of things. On the 12th of January, the presidency engaged them formally. And then in March, they issued a report. On the 27th of April, was it? 27th of March, they issued the report. Then the president, in April, decided, 27th of April, decided to give some information out of this. The Media Foundation for West Africa filed an application to it, RTI, actually on the 24th of April, seeking that the president releases the full report. They declined. Today, they say that the president has decided to waive his rights to keep this information to himself and made it public. Bright Simmons, we begin with you. Thank you very much. You have followed this, and Imani, ASEP, you have done such a great job in assisting the Fourth Estate to be able to produce this investigative documentary. What, from where you sit, shall we say about the KPMG report?
Thank you very much, Samson. I wonder if you can hear me. I have a bit of a difficulty. I'm traveling, so I'm not using my usual equipment. Are you able to hear me?
Very clearly, sir.
Okay, wonderful. Are you also able to see my screen, sir?
It should be projected shortly. Yes, okay. Go ahead.
Wonderful. So I think the challenge here is that we had a summarized version of the report and something that is like a white paper issued by the president, if you recall. So what I'm trying to explain today is whether or not the KPMG report itself, having been issued now, makes a difference. We have to first recognize that KPMG's undertaking, the work that KPMG did, had 3 or more different components. You had a fact-finding. Essentially, they went through a research process to establish key facts. They also made some reasoned judgments from those facts, inferences, and then they made opinions. Our position, those of us in civil society, particularly those that have been involved in this matter from the beginning, based off the work that Fourth Estate started with ASEP, our view is that the fact-finding exercises were thorough and useful, but we do not agree with the inferred judgments that were made. And if you give me a few minutes, I will explain how the facts that were established in the report, that were uncovered in the report, do not always support the conclusions that were made, and why, therefore, it was extremely important that the president release this report. And the president should not have waited until the Media Foundation for West Africa filed an RTI, a right to information request, essentially compelling him to release this report. Because without this report, we would not have been able to find the very critical information that we now have that established clearly that some of the conclusions that were reached were actually unnecessary. All we need are the facts. And if you get the facts, you come to the conclusion that this was a very problematic issue. To recap, there were 7 contracts covering 4 services. Of those 4 services, one of them, the upstream petroleum monitoring and the minerals and mining monitoring. So essentially, the monitoring of the oil that we produce in Ghana and the monitoring of the gold and other minerals we produce in Ghana were not active as of the time of this investigation. So essentially, only 3 of the services were active. Of those 3 services, one was in respect of how to prevent importers bringing goods in this country from lying about how much they paid for those goods overseas. The second was to prevent GRA itself from using assessment or making assessments that were not in line with what the invoice information about those imported goods suggests they should have assessed those duties to be. So essentially, you bring in some goods from overseas, GRA is responsible for determining the duty you should pay based on a number of factors. SML's role was to look over the shoulder of GRA to make sure that the declarations they are making about how much you should pay in duty are correct. So keep in mind these 2 key services. How much did you pay for the item, which will impact the duty, and then whether or not, based on the assessed value of how much that you pay for it, the duty that you are due. Also, of course, based on a number of laws and other rules, whether that duty is correct. So those are the 2 services. And the third service was to monitor the sale of petroleum fuels like gasoline and the like in the market, what we call petrol, and to make sure that the people that sell the petrol are paying the right prices. So these are the key areas. Now, here are the discrepancies between what the president told us in his white paper and what we now know from having read the full 300 and something page report by KPMG. Number one, the amount of money that KPMG established that this company was paid was significantly more than what the president told us. The president told us they were paid about 1 billion cedis. In actual fact, they were paid about 1.4 billion cedis.
Right.
The discrepancy there is obviously because the presidency decided that the tax amount should not have been included. This is confusing because if you recall, the company itself kept saying that the amount that the president stated, based on the summarized version of the KPMG report, does not take into account the taxes that they had paid.
That's right.
So that's an important point. The truth of the matter, though, is that actually the number that the president gave us already took into account the taxes that have been paid. But bear in mind the amount that I'm talking about, 1.4 billion cedis. That amount is in actual fact more than some of the loans that we get from the World Bank, which sometimes lead to fisticuffs and other unpleasant sights in our parliament because of the sheer importance of our current, the sheer precarity of our current debt situation. So you have to bear in mind the context in which we are speaking. We're talking about a huge amount of money. Money that typically we have to go to the World Bank to borrow. The key principle here is that the money that the president mentioned in this report was net of taxes. So this company actually received more than that amount that was stated in the report. The second critical element, and that critical element is tied to this first point, is that this company actually owes the country taxes. So in addition to receiving all of this money, there is about 31 million cedis in withholding taxes and VAT that this company has still not paid. And that fact was also not in the president's report, because one will have assumed that this is a material point, that this is a company that owes Ghana, and for which reason we have to be worried about that. The second issue is whether or not this amount of money was in actual fact deserved. Did they really do any work for which reason we ought to pay them 1.4 billion Ghana cedis.
Bright, just a second intervention. Did you say over 30 million in taxes or 13 million?
So it's 30 million. So if you look at the
13.38.
No, there's 13.38. But when you look at the total amount of both the VAT and the withholding, it amounts to about 31 million cedis thereabout.
All right.
And you can quote the exact page in a minute. Give me a second. But let me just run through this and then I'll come back to that point.
That's okay.
The issue around whether or not this company deserves this money is, of course, at the heart of this. Because if, of course, Ghana had derived value from this, there will be no problem. If you recall very carefully, a lot of the analysis was based on the view that until this company came in, GRA did not know how much petroleum these companies that sell the petroleum, let's just use petrol to make it easier. The companies that sell petrol in this country, they lie about how much they are selling. And if you lie about how much you are selling, you also lie about how much taxes you pay. But the taxes are on the volumes. Now, the truth of the matter is, when you look carefully at the report and you read the entire report, it becomes apparent that all of this confusion is just simple, logical analysis gone wrong. And I will explain in a moment. So what you are seeing on the screen now is essentially the argument that has been made that until about 2020, when this company came in, GRA was declaring volumes of petrol sold on which taxes have been paid. That was just a little above half of what it should have been. And then, since this company came in, the amount of fuel that GRA is declaring is now closer to what actually comes into the country. So the first logical flaw there is that we know how much fuel comes to the country, because that is how we're able to compare what GRA is using to charge taxes and what actually should have been the case. So the MPA data has never been in dispute. In fact, the gap that we claim is the result of under declaration, which this company is solving. That gap comes about because we know from NPA what the fuel amount should be. So that's the first logical flaw, which tells us that it's not about not knowing about the amount of fuel in circulation. It's about some companies being able to evade tax, even when we know they pick up the fuel and sold it. So that's the first logical flaw. The second logical flaw, which comes from the reporting, is that GRA had challenges with its information because initially it was reliant on what the companies declare in their tax filings. Now, that problem is a very simple problem. It came about because until August 2018, there was no connection between the data that we get at the ports through a system that now we call ICAMS, and before then had different names, including GCMS, and it was managed by a company called GCNet, and is today managed by a company called GhanaLink. Now, that particular system gives us indication as to how much petrol is coming to the country. Now, until this matter changed, until this development occurred, which you've seen on the screen, there was no connection between that platform, the port system, and the GRA system. And it's only in August 2018 that an attempt was done. And then soon thereafter, the companies that were involved were kicked out, or attempts were made to kick them out. And in the process of attempts being made to kick them out and trying to transition between that system and the new system called GhanaLink, we had a gap period. Now, if you look at it very carefully, it's in 2020 that this new ICUMS or ICAMS was integrated fully into the GRA system. Now, when you go back and you look into the KPMG report and you look at the discrepancy period and then the non-discrepancy period, it becomes extremely apparent that the only thing that was missing was this integration. Let me explain very carefully. What you see on the left-hand side of the screen, where it says pre-SML, is the period before SML was engaged. And what SML has been trying to convince us is that this gap between what GRA used to, the information GRA has, and the information NPA, which is the main regulator, has, was due to under-declaration. And then what you see on the screen, the green and the blue, is when they came into the picture, and they are trying to prove to you that there was a convergence. That gap vanished. What I'm trying to explain to you is that the red line that you see in the middle is the period during which is April 2020, is that period when ICAMS was integrated into GRA's platform. And if you see it carefully, you see that it comes before May 2020, when this new company, the black line that you see, the black dotted line, when this company came. So you see that the convergence, the green and the red, converging together appears before SML actually comes to the picture. Yeah. And that is what we see in the KPMG report on page 157.
Right.
And that line you see is the dates or the period in which ICAMS, which is at the port, was integrated into the GRE platform. So it tells you clearly that before SML was brought into the picture, that convergence, that narrowing of the gap between the green line, which represents the MPA data, and the red line, which represents the GRE, had already happened. You can see it clearly now. And this is in page 157 of the KPMG report. And this information the president refused to share with us. Another thing that you also see in the KPMG report that the president refused to share with us, and why, therefore, Media Foundation for West Africa and Four State had to force him to do so through the RTI process, and which, if that had not happened, we would not have known, is the fact that actually KPMG already told the president that a lot of the increases in revenue we saw was not due to SML's work, but was due to the fact that tax rates were changing. Of course, prices of petroleum have also been changing. So if petrol prices go up over time, and then you have ad valorem taxes, those ad valorem taxes will go up.
Common
when you have
sense.
specific taxes, if the taxes themselves go up, then the volume will go up. And that is also in page 158 of the KPMG report, which the president refused to share with the people of Ghana. So that information was captured, but was not shared. So what you have to bear in mind, as I explained at the very beginning, is that we have fact-finding, and then we have inferences from the facts, and we have opinions.
Right.
What we are saying is that rely on the facts, and if you rely on the facts, it comes to the conclusion, you come to the conclusion clearly that the SML contribution was useless. Another critical thing that I'm going to wrap up very soon, another critical thing we learn in the report, which the president doesn't tell us, is that the SML flow meters, you remember those ultrasonic flow meters they say they went to put in the various depots and therefore prevented the companies from lying to us? Well, in the report, if you look carefully at the findings of KPMG, it turns out that those devices were not working, because some of the companies, or actually more all of the companies, tend to flush the pipes with water. So that confuses the readings. So throughout the period in which these flow meters were installed, they were not effective, and nobody was using that data for anything, because you couldn't use it for assurance. There were discrepancies. It was in August 2023, years after they started, that they decided that because the flow meters don't work, they're going to put what we call automatic tank gauges. And they started to establish them. They only managed to put 5 of them in place, all of them in the government-controlled depots, which is bust, where we have the least problems if our assumption is that it's private companies that are cheating the government. So in effect, nothing that SML did during that period contributed anything whatsoever to the under-declaration. The fourth critical thing we also learned from the report is that GRA did write to the Ministry of Finance and asked the Ministry of Finance to conduct a value for money analysis in order for this to be established, whether or not, because remember, this whole deal was imposed on GRA. It was imposed on GRA by the Ministry of Finance. So the question was, GRA then said, or rather the development was that GRA wrote to the Ministry of Finance as late as far back as 2021, asking them to conduct a value for money analysis in order to establish whether or not this service was delivering any benefits. What we know is that they refused to do it. They wrote letters back saying they were going to do it, and they never did it till now. And the last point, which is actually very fascinating, is that in the KPMG report, we learned that some of the services that SML provided, particularly the ones to do with trying to prevent importers from lying about the prices of the goods that they buy, which will affect the duty, and trying to prevent GRA officers from lying about the right duty they should impose, those services, the database around the price information, that database that was being charged for the TVAS was being charged at an astronomical cost. We ended up paying over $15 million, nearly $16 million. $16 million. When in fact, you have alternatives on the open market, which will have cost us barely $20,000. So keep that in mind. We ended up paying nearly $16 million to help, for these companies to apparently help us prevent importers from lying about the prices of the goods they bought overseas to sell in this country, when we could just have simply subscribed to commercial databases and paid less than $20,000 or thereabout for the same information. Thank you very much, Samson.
Just one question for you, and many Ghanaians are asking, what's the end game? What should be the end game on the back of this report? Okay, several. One, we need a complete overhaul of the single sourcing regime in this country.
It is clear that 90% of the time when they use this sourcing method, they have something to hide, and it leads to losses to the country. So that's number one. Number two, we need to look carefully at the entire revenue assurance logic in this country. We have a situation where in telecoms, we have a company called KPMG that is supposed to be keeping the telecom companies honest. We don't have any evidence whatsoever that the presence of this company that takes millions of dollars every month has led to any gains to the state. We collect maybe $100 and something million in taxes, and we end up paying almost $30 million to a company to collect it. What is the point of this logic? So revenue assurance is a problem in the petroleum sector, in the downstream sector. We have a number of other initiatives of this kind. We need now to initiate a branch, step, and root evaluation of the benefits of all these systems and then act accordingly. Thirdly, it was very clear that the contracts as it currently, the contracts as they currently exist, the consolidated contract, is not in Ghana's interest. We also know that we spent a lot of money buying some equipment and software and things like that. I think it is now time for the government to be very clear and upfront with us. How does it intend to extract value from the existing software and the hardware that were established? GRA has come out to say that it intends to implement the president's recommendations. But those were not recommendations. As I was trying to explain, the president's recommendations are at variance with what were in the report. So we now need a proper independent commission by people that have absolutely no interest in this matter and have the right credentials and the like of it, to come up with a real roadmap as to how we extricate ourselves from this really damaging situation that we find ourselves with SML. We pay so much money for nothing gained. And then we've created a room for potential judgment debts. So we need a very careful, thoughtful process to extricate ourselves. And then lastly, we have to ask ourselves, why is it that some people are able to go get away with not paying taxes in the petroleum sector? What are the political arrangements that are there that assures them and give them protection? These are all matters that have come out from this report. And I think that as a country, we need to be bold, daring, open-minded, and willing to really have a go at this so that we solve it permanently and not have this recurrent problem of people just taking our money for nothing.
Thank you very much, Bright. And Bright, I realize also, maybe a final question to you, that you are concerned about the posture of the presidency in declining or refusing the request to release the full documents. And you find that even when it is being released, now the presidency obviously struggles to explain. So it dedicates over a page or so to explain its defense, why it did not release the report. Why is that an important point for you?
The truth of the matter is that when the president commissions these kinds of reports, if they come from institutions that have access to national security information and the likes of it, you could make the argument that they are privileged. So if, for instance, this had been an intelligence report based on investigations into how the tax evasion was happening in the first place, or if there was suspected corruption and the president needed a preliminary basis, then you could make the argument that this is privileged information because the president is being guided on matters that at that very point it's not meant for public engagement. This was a very different situation. This was a matter that was already in the public domain.
Right.
This was a matter where the president himself had advised and had informed the public that was conducting this study in order to address the public controversy. Remember, thirdly, KPMG is not an organization that has national security or other types of clearances for which reason information it handles can be properly called privileged. All the information that KPMG collected are information that ought to be in the public domain. Information about whether or not a particular system that is supposed to be helping with assurance in the downstream petroleum sector, whether or not the transaction services, audit service, etc., is working, are technical matters. And in the Act, we call them factual and statistical for the most part. So the argument the president made that they are privileged is extremely shaky. The argument is on very shaky legs.
Right.
Because if you look at the report as it's been currently disclosed, what about this report is classified? What about it is classified? Everything in this report is meant for the public. So my view is that it's not a matter of blanket privilege to say that every time I'm advised, that advice must remain a privilege. It must only remain privilege if the people that are advising you have reasons for which the public should not be informed. And I don't think this is the case in this scenario.
Okay, thank you very much. And as someone who has played a lead role in this process for the RTI and still doing work in this area, writing and researching for its advancement, it is something that is clear to me that when you quote Section 5, you quote Section 5(1), A and B and II of it to say that this information is exempt merely because it has been presented to the presidency or the vice president for consideration and has recommendations, advice, and so on, is something that cannot be accurate. The controller of that provision in law is the last part of it, that it is likely to undermine, if you disclose the information, it is likely to undermine the deliberative process on the part of the president or the vice president. This is the controller of that provision. So if you are releasing it, the question to ask is, will it undermine, is it likely to undermine the deliberative process? The question to ask is, the report has been issued. The president actually issued a report on the back of the report. Is there anything outstanding for deliberation? That is the question. And more importantly also, for those who use these processes in the government agencies and the rest, always pay attention not only to the exempt clauses. The exempt clauses, they are carefully crafted. So you see that they are qualified. They are not overbroad and say because of this, it's carefully qualified. And they are all from sections 5 through to 16. They are eventually controlled by section 17. I'll read that and get to Atabedu, and then we bring on Sam George. Section 17 says, disclosure for the protection of public interest. Despite a provision of this act on information exempt from disclosure, so it doesn't matter that the information is exempt from disclosure. Information is not exempt from disclosure if the disclosure of the information reveals evidence of a contravention of or a failure to comply with law. This KPMG report, there is a contravention and a failure to comply with law. The law says even if it is exempt and there is a contravention, it is not exempt. And I see that they quote a case I did for the Media Foundation for West Africa. They quote it wrongly to try to support their situation. They didn't name the case. The final point here is that if the disclosure of the information will outweigh, the benefit of the disclosure will outweigh any danger, the law says disclose it. What's your reading of the report?
When you played back the video, obviously
you were listening to yourself.
You saw me in there, and I had dissected it.
Yeah.
And concluded that it shouldn't have been in the first place.
That was before the report. Now we have the report.
Now we have the report.
306 pages.
That it shouldn't have been. Now, I'll go to some basic principles.
All right.
For example, before you engage a vendor, we go through a pre-qualification. The Procurement Act specifies it. Now, whilst you are pre-qualifying, there are certain requirements which are more legal or regulatory in nature, like the company should be registered, blah, blah, blah. Then, depending on the nature of the service that is to be provided, you ask yourself, is this a regulated service or it's an open service? If it's a regulated service, what are the requirements? So, for example, if you read the ICA Act, what services they are providing qualifies as what is defined or described as public practice of accountancy. It means the institution should have been licensed by the Institute of Chartered Accountants. The question is, are they licensed? So as a procurement person, when I'm doing pre-qualification, it will be one of the first requirements I would make. Show me proof. And I can take you to the ICA Act.
You're still here on Newsfile. It is your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first.
Section 35(1) says that for the purpose of this act, a person is engaged in public practice of accountancy if the person acting alone or in partnership with another person and in consideration of remuneration received or to be received, engages in the practice of accountancy or portrays to the public that the person is a member of the institute. Offers to perform or performs a service involving auditing or verification of financial transactions, books or records, or the preparation, verification, and certification of financial accounting reports and related statements. So B here defines what the service is and what they are doing. And C says, renders professional service or assistance in respect of matters that in principle or detail relate to accounting procedure and certification of financial facts and data. So when you are verifying volumes and all of that, it means you should be under the regulation of the ICA. The first question I would ask the GRA as the procurement entities, do they have that to prove that they are qualified to do this? Then you come to procurement, the Procurement Act. And I listened to Bright, and Bright said that there's the need to overhaul the single source. There's no need to overhaul it. It's black and white. I'll take you to that part.
It's the abuse of it.
It's the abuse of it.
Okay, so take us there and tell us why.
Now, go to section 40 of 663 as amended.
Right.
41 says, a procurement entity may engage in single source procurement under section 41 with the approval of the board. With the approval, it is a condition precedent. It requires prior approval. You don't do it and come back. Where goods, works, or services are only available from a particular supplier or contractor. So the question is accounting services and audit services only available from a particular person? Obviously, no. So it doesn't qualify.
This was their first, and the government has been their only client, so to speak, customer.
That itself is questionable and raises a lot of corporate governance questions.
As the report said, they began and they were incorporated in 2017, February. They started as SMEL. That's what the report said, SMEL. And they were incorporated on the 14th of February 2017. Then June to September 2017, GRA made 3 unsuccessful attempts to obtain the PPA's approval to single source SMEL to provide transaction audit services. November 2017, SMEL then changed its name to SML. Then June 2018, SML got appointed as a subcontractor to West Blue Ghana Limited as a service provider to the GRA. Then later, the contract was extended and so on. It became the main contractor without PPA approval. You said the condition is not subsequent, it's precedent.
Yes. Now, the subcontractor part is also a bit baffling. But let me proceed and then I'll come to that part.
Go ahead, please.
So if you look at the exclusions, the basis for single sourcing, this is not proprietary.
Right.
Next one is about agency of need. There's no agency here. Next one is about catastrophic events. There's no catastrophic event. So if you look at the criteria for getting approval for single sourcing. It doesn't qualify.
That
is why on 3 occasions they were denied.
Okay.
Now, once a change of name happened, the question should have raised this thing that something is not right. Why have they changed the name? Then they decided to do subcontracting. And you guys are lawyers. Standard drafting. Provisions of a contract where it talks about assignments, contracting, novation, and the like. It also requires prior approval. So you cannot appoint a subcontractor without the prior approval of the principal. It's a standard clause. So the question is, who appointed them? West Blue. The presumption is that West Blue has already gone through the process and has been appointed and given a scope of services. So this scope of service that was subcontracted to these guys, was it originally in West Blue's contract? Because if it was not there, they don't even have the mandate to subcontract it to somebody.
How about if it got amended subsequently?
They should bring the proof.
That West Blue amended its contract and said that we will subcontract to someone else.
And if you were going to, because West Blue's contract is a multi-year contract,
okay,
it should have gone to Parliament. PPA would have given approval. So if you were going to vary the scope of their contracts with such materiality, you are supposed to go back. And in this case, looking at the amount involved, the threshold would have required that it would go as far as the Central Tender Review Board. So people would have been able to look into it. The question is, where was the Central Tender Review Board in all of this? So GRA on its own could not or should not have subcontracted through West Blue. Now, in describing the formation of the company and the principles behind it, and if you read the ICA Act, it is very clear. If the principal behind the company is a former auditor general, who left that job and immediately surfaced here.
Controller General.
Immediately surfaced here. Immediately, from a corporate governance perspective.
But remember, it's not only Controller General. He left there and went to the GRA.
Not Controller, Commissioner General.
Commissioner General.
No.
He used to be a commissioner. He was a deputy. He was
Controller General.
Yeah.
The Accountant General. Sorry.
Accountant General, yes.
The one who pays your public officers. And then moved to GRA, where he was working for the Commissioner General.
So if you look at his stature, he has the ability to exert influence. And so when you, from a corporate governance perspective, when you are analyzing conflict of interest, one of the variables is the person in a position to exert influence? And you can see it clearly there. So is it that influence that forced the authorities at GRA to do everything humanly possible to make sure that this contract comes into fruition?
Your concern will be that when this contract was going through all the processes, he was there.
He was there.
Then he left and became the managing director of this company.
Either he was there or he would have stepped out, but he still had influence. So it raises code of conduct issues, it raises conflict of interest issues before all the others will come in. Now, if you come to the Act, PPA Act again, this has happened. The media blitz has already happened. What has been the actions of the PPA subsequent to this? They have the power to revisit it. If we go to section 83 or 89, let me get there.
But they had ratified. Once the ratification came in...
That is why I'm going to it.
To the mother contract, then everything else...
That is why I'm going to it.
Everything else that was sinful had been cured.
No. See, okay, so let me explain the thinking behind it. The Act says, I have these procurement methods, and you are supposed to use them in this way. At any point in time, when the board finds reason to believe that there's been a violation, it has the authority to appoint an investigator So before an investigator would have been appointed, there is some form of prima facie evidence that there's been a contravention. Now the investigator is supposed to go and find out the details of it. When the investigator is done with his job, he brings a report back to them. When he establishes that there's been a violation, it means that a contract has already been done. So a liability has been created for the state or for the entity. So in this section, what the board is mandated to do per the Act is that after reviewing it, you can cancel it.
That's correct.
But if cancelling it would create, for example, a judgment debt, which is not worth cancelling, then you can ratify it. It gives other options they can use.
That's right.
But the question is, it doesn't take away the fact that there's been a violation. And the Act further prescribes in Section 90 down what should be done to people who contravene the Act. My question is, in all their ratifications, and this particular board has done a lot, what has happened to people who contravene the Act?
What does the Act say should be done to those who contravene the Act? And
it specifies penalties.
Yes.
But also where they find that something on top
share them directly with us.
Okay.
And then we'll bring on Sam George, also having read the report so far. What are his views on them? This is Newsfile, it's our most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. And you just sent in a message, say, why am I allowing Bright Simmons to poo-poo the report of KPMG and question their judgment? He applauds their findings, but their inferences he has issues with, and he should be entitled to do so. Even a court judgment is not sacrosanct, like Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh will say. Finality does not connote infallibility. We obey the Supreme Court because its word is final, but it is not because its word is infallible. Yes.
Section 92 says that, 92(1) says that a person who contravenes a provision of this Act commits an offense, and where a penalty is not provided for the offense, that person is liable on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding 2,500 penalty units, or a term of imprisonment not exceeding 5 years, or both the fine and the imprisonment.
Interesting.
Now, further, because of the IOCO Act and the SFO Act, the authority can forward the dossier to any of these, because they are procurement offenses, for them to further.
Procurement offenses for which some people have lost their office, independent constitutional office.
Yes.
For which Martin Amidu says Kisei Jabin should be removed as a special prosecutor.
So these people can also take it up and actually prosecute the person and make sure the person get the right punishment.
But after your reading of this 306-page report, do you say this is all that should happen, or there is something else that must happen?
There's more. The report now points you in the places you should look. And if you go and look at all of them, you find out, just like I've pointed out that the ICA Act has been violated, you find out that the Public Financial Management Act has been violated, you find out that Internal Audit Agency Act has been violated. So you find out that a lot of other acts have been violated. What happens to all of them?
Interesting. Yes, Sam George.
Let me say a very good morning to you and Atabedu, and then the viewers across the country. Something I'll just start by saying that your take is a very serious one that you had this morning, and that we should take very seriously as a country. I hope we don't reduce it to political football because of the sacrosanct, how sacrosanct that office is. Let me also say a happy AU Day to our viewers, and hope that one day Africa can be truly free. On this issue, I think that Bright and Atta have done very extensive work. And I wouldn't want to flog the issues anymore, but I think that we are all added them on the fact that clearly this SML to SML, from SMEL to SML, deal is the classic example of what Justice Doche meant when he said create, loot, and share. One of the key things we must bear in mind is that all of this happened with the tacit approval of the then Minister of Finance, Ken Ofori-Atta. As usual, he's trying to run under the radar, and people are failing to realize the key cardinal role he played in this entire arrangement. Look, I'm being careful my choice of words. And I said to someone said to me that seeing my face on TV this morning looks like I was coming to release fire, and I said I'll do it with a smile. The Ghana Revenue Authority, in my humble opinion, is a crime scene and is the biggest single purveyor of corruption in our public service.
That's an unfair statement.
I'd explain.
That's too broad and sweeping.
I know. But something, if you know half of the things that I know, you would ask for the dissolution of the GRA and a reconstitution of the whole GRA. Look, the GRA is supposed to be the watchdog, ensuring that nobody evades taxes. In this SML deal, the GRA itself failed to withhold tax. You introduced me as a member of the Public Accounts Committee. Several institutions appear before the Public Accounts Committee because the Auditor General had found out that they carried out transactions with institutions and failed to withhold tax. In fact, sometimes we impose penalties on them to pay with interest.
KPMG in this report said it has alerted GRA to make a demand for the amounts not paid, and they have made the amount to SML.
No, you see, that is the VAT component. But the withholding tax is not supposed to be withheld by SML.
That's correct.
It's by GRA in making the payments.
That's correct.
So when GRA was making payments to SML, they ought to know that they ought to have withheld taxes. But that points to the point Atta tried to make, that it appears as though the GRA itself is under duress in this deal, where officers of the GRA, because of the overwhelming influence of the patriarchs of SML and their relationship with the GRA, people are under so much duress that they are failing to even carry out the basic, forget the procurement things that I was spoken about, those are even like very complex things. The basic thing, okay, you've created looting and you are sharing. The small withholding tax, that is the base. That also, the GRA itself. So when the policeman is involved in armed robbery, who arrests him?
Because if any firm in this country fails to withhold tax, the GRA, after an audit, makes the firm pay up that amount it failed to withhold.
With a penalty.
With a penalty.
With a penalty.
And the penalty is up to 300%.
Yes.
That is their own law that they implement.
So you see the earlier statement I made, and this is just one example of how the GRA itself, in fact, this is one of its core things, ensuring the payment or withholding of taxes and all of that. Samson, when you look at the entire, and Bright Simon spoke about it, this whole revenue assurance business. In principle, let me state it emphatically here, I don't think that revenue assurance is a bad thing. But revenue assurance has become the biggest looting avenue in the state. And look, I will be fair here and honest here. It is not peculiar to only this government.
Thank you.
It's something that private enterprise has seen as a lacuna, uses the whole concept of revenue assurance to corrupt public officials, to loot the state in connivance with them. We all heard how members of this government, in fact, members of parliament today, in fact, one of them is a sector minister. Esther Usu. She sat on this your platform and sang with Suba in a song. You remember? how SUBA was wrong. What was SUBA? It was signed under the NDC. SUBA was a revenue assurance in the telecom sector. She said it was wrong, it was criminal. She sang with it and campaigned with it. She came into office, and what did she do? She signed Kelny GVG and paid more than SUBA was being paid. Whilst the communications ministry has a legitimate issue with determining what is really going on with the telecom sectors, with the telecom operators, because take it from me, the MNOs are stealing from the state. MTN, Telecel, Airtel, Tigo, they are not declaring their true revenues. We all know it. So we need to find a way to determine what really is due the state. That's one thing.
So,
but the GRA,
how to do that is revenue assurance.
That's a statement you've made.
Yes, and they know. Ask people in the telecom sector.
That's unfair.
No, Ata, you see, you cannot approbate and reprobate because you are in the telecom sector. You know that the amounts that are declared to the state, if we were to do proper real-time monitoring, we don't have visibility. Today, the state of Ghana does not have true visibility on transactions that are going on all the telecom platforms. Tell me I'm lying. Yes or no? Am I lying or telling the truth?
I wouldn't want to go into the details of it, but I can assure you that I agree with you on one breath that whole business of revenue assurance is unnecessary. So it shouldn't have been either way on both sides.
He didn't say it's unnecessary. He says it's a conduit for corruption. It is like the easiest way to steal from the state. The state says, I don't know exactly how to measure this thing. Then it goes to bring in private enterprise. Measure it for me. And then through that process, money is shared.
Let's not digress. I'm sure we can come back
But you see, the point I was making, and the point I was trying to make with GRA, because I'm establishing the modus operandi at the GRA. Whether it is SUBA under the NDC or Kelny GVG under the MPP, bottom line is these two arrangements were supposed to provide the GRA with some information from CDRs to be able to determine tax liability, even though these contracts were signed under the NCA, which is the agency under the Ministry of Communications. Both under the NDC and under the current MPP administration, the GRA has gone to sign parallel revenue assurance contracts with a company whose registration has been dissolved in the UK before they even signed the contract with them, called Safari Tech. And you see, if you follow all the things that have been happening with SML and what is on their website and what is in reality, and when you go into Safari Tech's office, it's a tailoring shop. When you look at the address on their thing, the GPS, and even the fiscal address, when you go, it's a tailoring shop in Bachona.
Oh.
I'm telling you, look, I have here, I can show you.
So we are unable to independently confirm and verify. You know,
I've mentioned the name of the company.
Claims. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
So I'm saying that
that's why
go
it's
on
important.
their website. Look, and I've said this publicly before.
We are unable to verify this.
It's not a problem.
Independently for now.
This is their UK incorporation.
And I will urge you to keep your focus on the subject of SML now.
No, I'm building a case on why SML has happened, because it fits into a trend. And so that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but if you bring in an entity that is not here to answer, it is unfair.
Oh, this matter, I've even raised it with the GRA at public accounts and they've admitted. So it's a matter of public records. You understand me? But I'm showing you and establishing for you that the GRA itself has seen that agencies of state are doing this revenue assurance business. And so it's an easy way. Let's ask ourselves, revenue is what? It is the core mandate of the GRA. Is that not the core mandate of the GRA? Revenue collection. And so if the GRA says that the revenue collection, which is their core mandate, they are unable to verify and assure us that the revenue they are collecting is proper, and they now need a private sector player to come and give them assurance of their core mandates, then why is the GRA there? You see, at I'm coming. This SML deal, can the GRA show us a needs assessment that was done that showed the need for this particular
The report says there was no needs assessment. In fact, the job that the president gave to KPMG,
yes,
the very first of the terms of reference was needs assessment.
Yes.
And they confirmed conclusively that there was not any such.
Why? Why is there no, why, and even if we had done a needs assessment, because if you read the KPMG report, it clearly ends up by telling you that whatever SML was doing was unnecessary. It was duplication. So even if you did a needs assessment, the needs assessment would have highlighted the fact that there was no need for it.
Mechanisms already
Why?
for doing that.
Because the NPA had put in place a mechanism. So you realize what I'm doing? What I'm doing for you is I'm establishing, and that's why I went into the telecom sector, to establish how when an agency in a sector puts in place its own mechanisms, the GRA then duplicates it and pays people for no work done. The same way they've done with revenue assurance in the telecom sector, the NPA is responsible for this.
And pays people who are suspected to be supplanted. So they go set up a company and somebody is interested in it. Yes. Then they give you the contract. They are paying to the company, but in actual fact, they are paying themselves.
Exactly. Who are the beneficial owners?
Let me correct something Sam George made, the point Sam George made. In principle, we call it make or buy decision making in procurement. Anything that has to be done can either be done by yourself or do it through someone. It is when you decide to do it through someone that you are activating your procurement process to find a third party to do it for you. So they have responsibilities per their act.
But sadly, our governments cannot do things by themselves. If they have to buy cars, they need a third party to go and buy them. If they have to buy ambulances, they know where to find them in the shop. They will still get a third party to go and buy them. What's going on in this country?
Now, this thing is directly connected to the pricing model as well, or the commercial model of the whole arrangement. So let me break it down to the layman's, simple man understanding.
But be brief, because it is some judge's presentation you are interrupting.
I want to serve 10 people kinky. If I decide to do it myself, I'm going down the value chain to go and buy the maize. Come and soak it, mill it, make the kinky, add the fish, make the pepper. How much time will I spend? How much will it cost me? If it will cost me 10 cedis, 100 cedis to do it, it means if I give it to someone else, it will cost the person the same 100 cedis if we went to the same market. The only reason why I'll go to someone else is because I'm only making kinky for 10 people, but that person makes kinky for 1,000 people.
When your job is kinky making, you don't give the job to somebody else. That's what some judge is saying.
The point I'm making here.
So before they even determine the pricing model that has ensured they have paid so much, they would have done the supply chain cost modeling, which helps you to build all the costs from base up. And it will tell you that I have to spend X to do it. Now, one, I don't have the resources to do it, or the people to do it. Two, I don't have the money to do it. I don't have this, so I've given it to a third party. So before you engage the person, and that is when you prepare to go into negotiation, you know that this is what it will cost me to do it. So plus or minus, if you want a profit of, let's say, 100%, the ceiling should be this. So you are going into negotiation. You always have your entry point and your exit point. And that defines the frame within which you...
I hear you loud and clear, but you see the point I'm making here, that's with your kinky analysis. That's exactly the point something interjected with that. If your business is kinky making, you need to explain to us why you are not making the kinky and now subletting to another kinky maker to do it. And that's why I started by saying, in principle, I'm not against revenue assurance.
Yeah.
When a regulator like the NCA, whose job it is to ensure the quality of service, decides that they need a third party to do revenue assurance, I can understand, because they are not kinky makers. But when an entity that is a revenue collection agency
has to build internal competence,
you have to build internal competencies, because that's what your job is. Because the amount of money that has been paid to SML, just SML, are you telling me that if we use that money to build the capacity of people in GRA, we couldn't have done this job?
And in this case, let's not forget that people within regulators of the industry, including in the state, have said that this is a duplication.
Yes. And you see, the point must be made that even in setting up this entity, it is someone from GRA who then goes to run the thing. So basically, it's like GRA hiving off itself, giving itself a private face, and saying to it, do the job, and now what I would have earned a salary from the taxpayer for, only a salary, let me earn a commercial interest in it. And so that's why I'm saying that, look, we need to come to that place where we admit and accept that, look, there is a need for deep reforms at the GRA. The GRA must understand what it is doing.
There's been some radical changes there in the last few months. Yeah.
Well, those changes, are they superficial? Are they consequential? Time will tell. But you see something, we need to ask ourselves very serious questions. Because as we speak, the GRA is engaged in all kinds of procurement. There's one, if I start talking about it now, you say it's not this matter. But domestic tax revenue, I'm sure you know about it. With Tata, KPMG, and all of that. Look, interesting things are going on in the GRA, which should worry any Ghanaian, because the GRA sets its own question, sets its marking scheme, and answers it. Oh, we set this target for ourselves. Look, something. The corruption. And when I started, I said that the GRA was arguably the most corrupt institution. You know why I say this? I can confidently say that my district, my constituency, is the fastest growing industrial district in Ghana. Because almost all the industries are moving into Nengo and Pram because of proximity to the Tema and the fact that Tema is full. And so they're setting up. And the constant complaint I get from industries, which are largely foreign owned by foreigners, but Ghanaian entities, is that, Sam, what is wrong with your country's people? GRA officials are basically hounding these businesses with atrocious tax demands, and then after they do that, the same officials come to them and say, well, either you change your headquarters from Ghana to Togo, and we can waive some of the taxes, or we cut a deal with you. And foreigners are asking me, what is wrong with your own country people? Look, let us call a spade a spade. This SML thing is just the tip of the iceberg. And that's why I'm saying that we should not sound ourselves hoarse. We must go beyond the SML, the face, what's his name? Soti. Soti is the face that has been put to it. Who are the patrons? Who are the facilitators? The beneficial owners of what Soti is doing. Something, per our laws, per the ruling in the Isofoton case, and correct me if I'm wrong, if a contract is null and void, payments made are retrievable. Yeah. Am I right?
So the agencies concerned are not even supposed to make payments?
Absolutely. So if we have paid 1.4 billion to a company that was set up on Valentine's Day, the first Valentine's Day after Nanado became president, February 14, 2017. They set it up as a love gift to themselves. And then within 3 months of setting up that illicit love child, they tried to get the PPA 3 times to approve sole sourcing. The same sole sourcing we were told by President Akufo-Addo was so wrong under President Mahama, was the worst thing to ever happen. And even in this time, even with the incompetence, in quotes, or the lack, no, not incompetence, the lack of competence, because incompetence and lack of competence are different. Even with the apparent lack of competence at the board level of the PPA, they were able to state and say, hey, this thing, it doesn't meet the base requirement. How they are able to squeeze it through. And don't forget, the GRA, like I keep saying, works at the behest and reports to the Minister of Finance.
Okay.
So we must ask questions of Ken Ofori-Atta. We must ask questions of Reverend Amishadai, under whose watch this thing happened. Because don't forget, Soti was an advisor to him. And then he goes to set up this company, and Amishadai is paying and his own former advisor. Okay. You know, something.
Let me go on the. Let me go on the. Let me
straighten my face. I said I'll say everything. I'll say with a smile.
Let me go to Manasseh, but before I do that, I need to state this again, that for those entities that Sam George has mentioned their names and made allegations against, we are not in a position to independently verify those adverse claims against them. And on that note, we will not be associated with those commentaries.
In fact, I'm using your platform to challenge them to dispute my claims so that I put out everything that I know.
Yes, but it appears you are suspicious of everything. And like we say, the courts have confirmed, a multitude of suspicions do not constitute proof of anything.
Absolutely.
Let me go to let me go to Manasseh.
I have my evidence here and my facts, and I hear you. To Amisha
let me go to Manasseh. Manasseh, thank you very much. There are many who are asking, but why is it that Manasseh is being vilified over this contract, including journalists who have made it a point to just project your photograph and insult you in the front of cameras for doing a research work together with your colleagues to unravel what has led to this KPMG report. To start with, you must be pleased that this report has led to the termination of 2 of the contracts and the suspension of the upstream minerals audit deal, which some civil society have said is just a rebirth of a JAPA that the government was seeking to corruptly benefit from our mineral resources through a JAPA. And when it didn't get it, it decided to give a contract to SML to do this so that they will siphon money. You are happy 2 contracts terminated, the upstream suspended, right?
Well, partially happy, as in the words used for some of the deliveries of SML, because there is more to this. I am not a lawyer, but I've reported on issues that went to court and some people went to jail. And I sincerely believe that looking at this report and what we know from the admissions made by officials of the GRA and SML, this is a case that has a number of candidates for jail. If any government wants to take this up, it is going to be very easy to put people to jail. It is going to be very easy for us to even retrieve hundreds, if not billions, of cedis paid to people who did not deserve a peswa. From the very beginning, we made a point, and it was not an opinion piece we wrote in that report. We interviewed GRA officials, the petroleum unit, and we actually wrote a letter from the Commissioner General directed that the petroleum department was better suited to speak to us. We went to SML. In that investigation, we went with a camera, not an AK-47. So there was no coercion. We asked questions and they confessed and deleted the claims they made to be providing the services. And this report actually makes some of us, I agree with Bright that the conclusion or the inference from KPMG is problematic, but it gives enough facts for us to be able to now know and can say that the GRA and the Office of the President may have lied. I'm saying lied and not falsehood, because if you have information, you know what is right, and your officials confirm on record, and you produce something that is different from your own facts to just make this company look good.
Tell us why you make such a statement.
So let's go to page 153 of the KPMG, sorry, 157 of the KPMG report. We said that SML did not do anything that deserved any payment. And the GRA issued a statement, and I am talking about the GRA, the management and the board of the GRA. And shortly before I report, the board chairman of GRA, who is a very known and celebrated businessman, I'm talking about Mr. Otinjesi, saying that procurement was avenue through which people loot the state, and he wondered why
private entities or organizations would do due diligence when procuring for their companies, but when it had to do with the state, they didn't care.
But you know, he's resigned his position, right? He's left the place.
I'm talking about the board chair who was there when these deals happened, and the board chair led the board of GRA to visit this place.
Okay.
So
and again, just a quick one. There was a reference to Christian Soti working under Amit Shaddai. He actually worked under Kofi Nti and not Amit Shaddai. Yes, go on, Manasseh.
So let me go to the page 157 of the report. And it says, an average of key findings, an average of 400 million liters per month was already being recorded in Ghana in 2019 and the first quarter of 2020, as per review of NPA's data. 2, NPA and GRA recorded a significant decrease in lifting volumes in April 2020. That is 336 million and 311 million liters respectively as a result of COVID-19 lockdown spanning the period 1 to 20 April 2020. 3, volumes recorded after April 2020 were constantly above 400 million liters. Then the final figure in this on this page says, in the latter half of 2020, when SML commenced operation, data comparison from 3 sources indicates that NPA reported higher annual volumes than both GRA and SML. Following NPA and GRA reported the next highest, following NPA, GRA reported the next highest annual volumes, with SML recording the lowest annual volumes. I'm saying this to make a point that the GRA told us that it was only when they brought SML, and SML started operations in May 2020, that they started recording over 400 million liters a month. And it's the reason they attribute the increase in revenue to SML. But this is what KPMG is saying, that before SML started its operation, even in 2019, GRA was already, NP was already recording up to 400 million liters. And then even when SML came in, GRA and then NPA were recording higher figures. So SML was recording the lowest. And if you look at the same chapter, page number 157, you will see a note there that GRA could not provide digital records of petroleum lifting data from January 2019 to April 2020. To compensate for this, GRA petroleum lifting data published in ESLA reports to the Parliament was utilized. So it appears that if GRA gave this figure to KPMG, KPMG could easily tell that the information was false. So GRA did not provide this figure to KPMG, but the same GRA had published these figures in its report to Parliament. The question we should be asking is, why was the authority hiding this figure? Because if they released these figures, they were going to expose the GRA. And finally, on this score, if you go to the very next page, that is page 158. Trends in downstream petroleum revenue. So we are talking of the volumes. We've now come to the revenue. And this is captured in the KPMG report, page 158. Key observations. The following were observed from the analysis of the revenue collected by the GRA over the period 2015 to 2023. 1. an incremental growth in revenue was observed from 2015 to 2023, except for a decline observed solely in 2017. So this shows that the revenue increment did not happen because of SML. 2, one significant, and the word significant is significant. One significant contributor to this growth was the increase in the number of taxes over the years. That is, from 2 taxes in 2015 to 5 taxes in 2023. The next point is, another significant contributor to this growth is the increase in tax rates in 2016 and 2019 and 2021. However, there was a decrease in tax rates in 2017, coinciding with a revenue reduction from 2016 to 2017. Then finally, on this page, the key observation: for any petroleum product lifted to be taxable, it must be declared in ICOMS. GRA's records of petroleum volumes lifted, taxable and non-taxable, are transmitted from NPA's ERDMS into ICOMS. SML's flow meters readings are used for assurance purposes only. These are the findings we made in our documentary. And we had the SML people. If you read the KPMG report, even though there was no needs assessment, the report said that SML's work may have been needed because a previous industry report said there might be under declaration going on. If that is the case, was SML doing under declaration? We put a microphone before the managing director of the company and asked, did you do under declaration? Did you check that? He says no. Did you check dilution? No. Did you check diversion? No. Why are these services on your website as having contributed to the success in the petroleum industry due to your operations with GRA? Or it was a mistake. SML goes to delete all these from their website. So the question is, this report clearly shows that SML did not contribute to the growth in the volumes. In fact, SML recorded the least. If you think there were under declarations that you were brought in and your records were the least of those that were already happening, what you recorded was never at any point used for any tax purposes. And remember, before this report, we asked GRA officials and they confirmed all of these in our documentaries, the documentary produced. So the question is, why were they paid? There is absolutely no justification why the Republic of Ghana should have paid a peswa to this company. And if they are talking about judgment debts, I think that we have a very good case to get a judgment debt against those that clearly took money for no work done. And then some people who aided this should be prosecuted. And it's very instructive to note that the finance ministry, headed by Ken Oforiatta, in 2023, said the finance minister, in a letter, the letter said the finance minister had determined that the services of SML should be extended to the gold mining sector and the oil production sectors. And we are now learning that the ministry failed or refused to conduct a value for money audit. So if you failed to conduct that audit, on what basis did Ken Oforiatta make this determination? And we wrote to the Minerals Commission, and the commission said they knew nothing about it, they were not consulted. We wrote to the Petroleum Commission, they knew nothing about it. And then the NPA, so the regulators in the sectors didn't know about it. So on what basis did the Minister of Finance cause this to be done to a point that Ghana was committed to over $100 million US dollars a year's contract to this company based on what we are learning. And Samson...
So Manasseh, don't go around the figures again, particularly for a good reason. You should know why I'm saying, I don't need to mention it, that you have to face the courts over this. So let's put that aside. But I just wanted briefly to ask you, on the, we know, for example, that Amishadai came in 2019 when these things were already going on. We know that Christian Soti had been working with the previous Commissioner General, and then he had also come from the Controller and Accountant General's office. That is a point you highlighted. What was the purpose?
The purpose is that the technical advisor to the Commissioner General of the Ghana Revenue Authority, if that technical advisor is competent and knows his or her job, they would not advise the GRA to go into this contract in the first place. Because it doesn't take a genius to visit SML and conclude that it was doing the work that was akin to the Danish writer Hans Christian Andersen, who wrote a classic short story titled The Emperor's New Clothes. They were doing practically nothing. And when you visit them and you interact with them, you will come to a singular conclusion that these people are doing nothing. And so it came as a surprise when people like Samuel Atachia, when people like Ransford Jampo of the University of Ghana would visit only SML and come back to make certain pronouncements that they were doing great. I wonder how they are feeling, Professor Jampo and then the people like Atachia reading this report. But what I'm saying is that if you have the technical advisor,
all right,
advising GRA to go into this contract with SML, then the contracts are awarded, and you leave your job as a technical advisor at GRA to now be the managing director of SML. These are facts that we put out for people to draw the connection.
All right. Thank you very much, Manasseh. And this is not a fact. That is not a fact upon which you have been sued. So I'm his lawyer, and he's been sued over this, but this is not one of the facts over which he has been sued. So we'll deal with it.
So you're guiding your client in his testimony on air.
No. We'll do that. We'll do that at the appropriate time. You mentioned Atachia. I must state that Atachia has said, quote, "We are not going to swallow hook, line, and sinker whatever Jubilee House is saying, but we will look at it and also do our recommendation for the House to look at it. This is our approach." So he is not, as it were, just minded to do the propaganda job of defending even without facts and simply just defending blindly. He's not doing that. If you can do me 30 seconds or a minute, because I need to go for a break.
So, on the issue of valuation, when we moved into destination inspection, I was a young career person at the time. I lodged the first destination inspection document with BVAC. Now, BVAC had two gentlemen there. One, Mr. McBruce, and then the other one, I've forgotten his name. These are people who were experienced in the Ministry of Trade and who understood valuation. At that time, in those two inspection companies we had, BVAC and the GSL, they had customs officers who had access to the World Customs Organization's database. And they were in those entities doing the valuation. So the capacity for doing valuation itself was sitting or is sitting in customs. So there's no reason why it should have gone out.
Okay.
Now, Bright said that we should look at the law, procurement law. If we have to look at any part of our body of laws, it is the powers that are concentrated in one person. The first one being the president. The second one, in my opinion, as a student of tax law, is the commissioner of the GRA. The third one is the Minister of Finance.
Okay.
Because all these analogous laws defer to him as the minister.
Right. And somebody sent a message trying to make a correlation that the way Manasseh mentions the finance minister, he should be thinking about what is happening to those who are being prosecuted over the ambulance case in this regard. Thank you very much. I return to share your views with the rest of the world, but the Telecoms Chamber wants me to tell Sam George that he cannot denigrate the industry without evidence. They say that you cannot be saying that the telcos are stealing from the state.
Yeah.
They are not. That currently there is a common platform that takes real-time data from the telcos, and there has been no theft found. So please, don't do this to them.
My big brother engineer Ken Ashibia sent me the message, but he himself knows. And
all right, okay.
Bias is known based on the telcos.
Right.
We all know.
Right.
He himself has challenges with the common platform.
All right, so we will not go into another debate on that. And for the many of you who are sending your messages not about the issues we are discussing, but about my outfit, you can get them one of this or even better from Konati Clothing. They are located at Adenta Shopping Center, Adenta Down. You can call them on 0244 676732, 0244 676732. Konati Clothing. What you wear counts, and they say they are giving up to 10% discounts if you are making purchases, making orders between now and Father's Day and between now and Eid al-Adha. Is it? We'll be right back.